Thank you, Dr. Swamy. Okay, so let me start with a brief introduction to the company that I founded and work for called E2 Language. And then we'll get stuck into my presentation about first language interference for Dravidian speakers. So E2 Language has been around for a number of years now. I think that's wrong. I think it's actually 2014. There you go. There's a typo. I think it's been around for about 6 years. As you mentioned, we specialize in high stakes English test prep for IELTS, PT, TOEFL, and OET, and we're 100% online. And obviously we did this well ahead of coronavirus and when everyone else was quite happily teaching face-to-face bricks and mortar. I guess we had the idea that one day things would go online. We didn't realize that they'd go online so suddenly with the shift with coronavirus and whatnot. As you mentioned, we've served over 1 million students so far. Our platform is self-study, has group classes, one-on-ones, writing and speaking feedback. I think we must have marked about 40,000 submissions, IELTS essays, etc. As you also mentioned, we have 1.1 million YouTube subscribers. So we've learned how to really leverage new media to grow a platform. So we're not just an educational institution, we're also very adept at marketing as well. And in addition to E2 Language, we've built a couple of other platforms, one of which is called E2 School. It's of interest because it covers all English language skills, including pronunciation and grammar, amongst others, which is very challenging to do with technology. And it also has a pathway from practically no English up to advanced English. So that's a special platform for that reason. And this platform here called E2 Classroom is infrastructure software for language schools. We realized that there was a dire need for schools to be able to plug and play technology. So we built a platform for them. And we have some very exciting news to be announced very soon about a partnership with Pearson on that. Okay, so let's get started with my talk. So today I'm going to be talking about mother tongue influence, or this in the South Indian context, or more technically, I'm talking about first language interference for Dravidian speakers. So the aim of today's session is to raise awareness of common difficulties with English pronunciation for speakers of Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, and Telugu. And I have a particular interest in this because I actually studied Kannada for a while when I was 20 years old, 21 years old. I think I lived in Mysore in Karnataka for 6 months and studied at the University of Mysore, and I took some classes in Kannada. Not that I remember them or much at all, but it was a really, really interesting experience. The other reason this is of interest to me is that about 30% of our million students, so 300,000 of our students, are from India. So obviously I needed to become a bit more expert in first language interference for those students. But really, all of the research and what I'm going to be talking about today comes from this specific book by Swan and Smith, and I highly recommend it. It's called Learner English, A Teacher's Guide to Interference and Other Problems. And basically what it does, it has chapters on all of the major languages from around the world and looks at how their first language relates to English or doesn't relate to English. And where it doesn't relate to English, that is where there are sounds, phonemes, for example, or consonant clusters that language doesn't have, that's going to pose a particular problem for that student. It also addresses grammatical features as well, so not just pronunciation. It really is like if you're teaching a classroom with a specific group of first language speakers, really a lot of what you teach, you obviously don't have to teach all of the sounds of English, or you don't have to teach all of the grammatical aspects of English. There will only be particular sounds, etc., that will be relevant. So we can really hone our teaching in on particular groups of students here. It's a bit different for me, for example, or teachers in Australia who teach a classroom of mixed language backgrounds. It's hard to specialize in specific languages, language interference, but certainly raising your awareness of what the major issues are is very helpful. Can I please ask everybody to mute their microphones as well, please? Okay, so before we begin, first of all, I just want to say that there are multiple Englishes worldwide, and there are multiple Indian Englishes as well. All of the Englishes, and I use that plural purposely, these are all legitimate forms of English language. I'm not saying that American English or British English is better than these forms of English. They're all completely valid in their own right. Each of them have distinct pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammatical features. However, there are issues that your students will run into if their first language, if their particular English, for example, is interfering with, for example, an English language test, whereby the examiner or the algorithm that is assessing their speaking doesn't like that particular pronunciation feature or that grammatical feature, for example. So your students need to be aware of more standard Englishes. That is the native-like Englishes of American, British, etc., especially for tests. But also more broadly, when they're applying for jobs or in a different context, because there is, unfortunately, discrimination with pronunciation and grammar, etc., that does happen. And it's real. And there's two things that we can do to fix this. One is we need to change the social understanding of languages so that people aren't narrow-minded about Indian English or Filipino English or whatever it is, especially for native speakers. They shouldn't be, what's the word here? They shouldn't be think that their specific English is better. But in saying that, it is the responsibility of the student at times to make sure that their English is more standardized. That's just the nature of it. And also what I'm going to talk about is common with all these specific Dravidian languages. Obviously what I'm speaking about is not comprehensive. Each of these have their own specific variations as well, which we'll get into. So let's think about a native Dravidian speaker talking to a non-Dravidian listener, such as me. And just a little anecdote. When I first arrived in Mysore as a 20-year-old and began my studies, the director of the program, Dr. Nagaraja Rao was his name, I could not understand him at all for about 3 weeks. His accent was very thick. He spoke very eloquent English, but his Kannada accent was so thick and my ear was not honed to Indian English, I couldn't understand him. I really struggled. After a long period of time, my understanding of that thick accent started to happen. And after a while, I could understand him perfectly well. But these are the sorts of issues that we want to think about today. And what we're really talking about is the issue of a thick accent. Accents are fine, but a thick accent is going to be problematic for your students. So what is an accent? Well, an accent has various ingredients. If we think about an accent, we want to think about it in terms of intelligibility, fluency, and even grammar and vocabulary could be considered part of that accent. And when I'm talking about intelligibility, I'm talking about pronunciation. So the word sounds, the consonants, the vowels, the diphthongs, the consonant clusters, all of the sounds, and we'll look at those today. Intonation is part of intelligibility, that is the up and the down of questions or statements, etc. Word stress, which is particularly important for Dravidian speakers. Then we've got fluency, which is another aspect of accent. And I must say that now working with, Shweta will know what I'm talking about, working with South Indians, sometimes they can speak rapidly. And this can pose a big problem for especially their English language tests or their workplace, etc. So they'll need to slow down. There's also elements of smoothness or hesitation and emphasis as well in fluency. And grammar and vocabulary is a completely different beast, which we won't focus on today, but that's certainly interesting, and there's certainly interference issues when it comes to grammar. Okay, so there are 2 key points here. First key point when you're thinking about first language interference is how different is your first language to standard English from the outset? And this is a branch of linguistics called contrastive analysis. So if you just took a language, let's say you took Kannada, and then you took English and you put them side by side and you look at them and you look at all the similarities and all the differences, okay? That's a key point because obviously some languages are much closer to English than others. you speak Dutch, for example, or even German, it's going to be much closer, certainly in pronunciation, than Malayalam or Korean or Japanese, for example. Okay, so there's that. Then there's another part of this, how different is your first language? Because let's say you actually speak English from Malayalam, but how close is your English to standard English? That's the sort of contrastive analysis we're looking at as well. The second key point here when you're talking to your students and teaching them is how conscious or unconscious are they of those differences? It seems to be quite phenomenal with second language speakers that sometimes they just are completely unaware of the errors that they are making. Okay, they might be pronunciation errors or they might be grammatical errors, but sometimes, or a lot of the time, they just simply are not conscious that they're making those errors. So our role as a teacher is to raise their awareness first and foremost, make them aware of those issues, and then train them on how they can improve. And of course, it's not about native English, it's about clarity. Although in saying that, if I think about the PTE speaking algorithm, in order to get the highest score possible with that, you do have to have what they call native-like English. So again, standardized English there is key. Let's shift to something much more practical now. Let's think about consonants, English consonants for the Dravidian languages, okay? So in English, there are 24 consonant sounds. I won't run through them, but let's just run through the top line. So P as in pig, B as in bird, T as in tea, D as in dog, Ch as in chair, J as in jam, K, G, for example. What was I going to say? I was going to say something there. Oh, okay. What is a consonant? I guess it's good to actually think about what is a consonant, what is a vowel. A consonant is a sound that we make where we actually impede the breath by some part of our facial anatomy, like our teeth or our lips or our tongue or the roof of our mouth. So it actually stops the sound. So if I think about P as in pig, for example, I'm impeding that airflow through my lips, and B as in bird, and T as in tea. Here I'm hitting the roof of my mouth with my tongue and I'm stopping that airflow. So that actually is the definition of a consonant. And we'll talk about vowels in a second. And vowels, in fact, do not impede the airflow, and that's why they are vowels. Anyway, 24 consonants in English. Now, if we look at the different languages here, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, and Telugu, very interestingly, Tamil has 18 consonant sounds, Malayalam 37, Kannada 34, and Telugu 33. So if you look at it from this angle, from this point of view, if you were an English speaker learning Malayalam, this is going to be really challenging because you're going to have to learn, I'm not very good at maths here, what's that? 13 new sounds. 13 new sounds, right? So you would think that for Malayalam speakers speaking English, they wouldn't have many problems with the consonant sounds of English. But as we'll see, there are some sounds that are problematic. Obviously, there is overlap. There are similar sounds in English and Dravidian languages. So the P, B, T, D, Ch, J, K, G, F, the, S, Sh, M, N, N, H, L, R, and Y are similar, okay? Sh is only in Malayalam and Kannada, and F is in Malayalam and Telugu only. So we're starting to see even variations amongst these languages. So I wouldn't concentrate on these sounds in the classroom. What I would concentrate on for your students are these sounds, okay? And I particularly concentrate on the differences between P and F, for example, or T and D, T and D. This is a massive issue for a lot of my students. A lot of their T sounds sound like D sounds. Teacher, for example, instead of teacher, teacher. And the th is in think and th is in they. S and z, sh and j. So these are the particular sounds, and this one in particular, I've got to say, this is a massive one. The v and the w sounds. This one just seems to really stump a lot of students from that geography. So for example, the difference between vet and wet, for example. A mistake that you would hear is, I went to the vet to what do you do with your dog? You took your dog to the vet. No, to the vet. So there seems to be a real problem with this v sound, and oftentimes it really sounds like a w sound. So that would be one that you would absolutely focus on and train them to initially feel very uncomfortable making that v sound, because it just sounds strange. The physiology of the mouth feels weird. But for me, as the standard English speaker, it sounds correct. It sounds accurate. It sounds like you're doing it right. Let's focus for a little bit now on the vowel sounds. We'll shift from consonants. And as I mentioned, vowel sounds, if we compare consonants, well, consonants are where you speak and you're impeding the sound with your teeth, your tongue, your lips, the roof of your mouth, etc. Vowel sounds are unimpeded. They just come out like ah, eh, I, ah, ah. There's no use of your mouth in that consonants. It's very much coming from your throat area. So these are the vowels. This is where it differs largely from these Dravidian languages. As you can see, English has 20 vowel sounds, almost double from Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, and Telugu. So this really should be an area of focus for you in the classroom. As we saw, consonants, still problems, but here, this is where students run into real problems. So these are the 20 vowel sounds in English: E as in sheep, I as in ship, as in pull, as in pull, ear as in hear, A as in way, for example. And here we've mixed up all the short vowels, long vowels, and multiple or combined or diphthong vowels as well. I'm not sure how to be perfectly frank with you, I don't think the IPA is a helpful tool at all for students. I certainly don't use it. To me, it looks like a completely different language. I think they find it completely perplexing. And to be perfectly honest with you, I find it completely perplexing as well. But nevertheless, it does serve some purpose here. Anyway, 20 vowel sounds, short, long, and combined vowels. These vowels have crossover in the Dravidian languages. So your students probably won't have too much trouble with these, but they will have trouble with these, and they will have particular trouble with the diphthongs or the combined vowels. Vowels like ear, as in hear, a, as in way. And what I'm talking about with a diphthong here is the combination of almost two vowel sounds in one. For example, with hear, it's ear, ear, ear. It sort of slides from one vowel to the next. It's almost like two vowels joined together, here, here. So these are going to pose problems for your students. Let's now think more practically about some teaching strategies. Okay, so we've identified what you need to focus on in the classroom. Now let's think about some activities that you could actually give your students to help them hone their vowel pronunciation. So we'll focus here on the schwa, on the and the sound. So and These are problem sounds. So what you might do in the classroom is model the sound, and we're talking very much about a physiological process here. Pronunciation is more like riding a bicycle than learning some sort of abstract theoretical conceptual rule. It's a physical thing. It's a very much muscle memory that we're talking about here. So you would model this with pictures, for example, or with your own mouth at the front of the classroom saying action, app, laptop, and contact, and showing them how they should shape their mouths while they make these sounds. Let's have a look at bird here, which is the long form of ah. So you can sort of look at similar sounds as well, long sounds versus short sounds. Bird, bird, and Then you might focus, we'll hit again, pictorially showing them how to make these sounds, as in first, earth, serve, bird, and her. It's also good to remind them that these sounds can come at the beginning of a word, as in earth, or in the middle of a word, as in serve, and possibly even at the end of the word, especially for the schwa sound, like teacher, doctor, problem, about. Then you can put it into practice. So sentences combining some of these sounds. Obviously, you wouldn't give them all the sounds at once. It's going to be too much to remember, but 2 or 3 is manageable. So we live on planet Earth. Ah, ah, I'm turning 30 on Thursday. The surgeon operated on my ankle. So we have the sound, and then some schwa, and is in ankle. Another good tool is to do minimal pairs. That is sounds that are almost identical, but one might be slightly longer, one might be aspirated or unaspirated, as in the difference between bad and bird. Bad, It's a nice way to get them to start to differentiate. One of the problems that they might be making is that they might be, in mispronouncing a particular vowel, they might be saying bird instead of bad, for example, or they might be saying bad instead of bird, for example. So when you get those erroneous crossovers, you need to tease them apart so they can start to firstly hear the distinctions and then to actually say it themselves. Again, a lot of this is, actually, let me step back there. There's something interesting with pronunciation, which is that the first thing that students need to be able to do with pronunciation is first actually hear the sound difference. And when we're first introduced to a strange phoneme, one that we haven't encountered before or one that we're not aware of, we actually can't even really hear it. It's sort of a strange thing of the mind. But then as we start to practice it and hear it more and more, we start to be able to distinguish it. Then we start to be able to actually produce it. Okay, so it's an interesting little step that you can't just get the students to begin saying it. First, you need them to begin hearing it first. Here's another minimal pair. Difference between fan and fern. Tongue twisters are a fun activity. And these are like mental and physiological exercises. So the first birds I heard were blackbirds. These are quite easy to write yourself, to be honest. If you can write some crazy sentences, but these sentences don't really need to make that much sense. It's not the point. The point is to get them to start exercising their mouths and the shapes of their mouths, etc. The problem of solving a problem is a problem. So the sounds. Get them to do it 5 times. The fat cat in the hat sat on the mat. Obviously, an image is helpful. Again, get them to produce it a number of times. Then you might move into some sort of read aloud type activity where you can use a color coding for the different sounds. So and So the pursuit of happiness is something many people are concerned with. Really overemphasize the sounds as well, and let them sort of practice with their friends or in the classroom, etc. Okay, let's take a little turn now. I want to talk about word stress. So we're moving on from pronunciation. We're talking about a form of pronunciation, and it's often one that gets very hidden, and certainly one that teachers neglect in the classroom. And I think it's as important as actually being able to articulate the sounds. So we're going to talk about word stress. So what is word stress? So every word consists of syllables, right? The sound form that you make. For example, you might have a single syllable word like cup, or you might have a multiple syllable word like microphone. Each time you're making a syllable, your mouth's making a different movement, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 syllables, for example, in words. So the word like medication, for example, has 4 syllables. Medication. Now, in words that have more than 1 syllable or 2 or more syllables, in English, in standard English, one syllable in the word is stressed. What I mean by stressed is it will go for slightly longer or it'll be slightly louder or both. That's what stressed means. So for the word medication, for example, medication, cation, the k or the k sound is slightly elongated and slightly louder than medication. Now, let me give you an example here of good word stress versus bad word stress that I heard the other day. And I thought it was a really interesting one that changed the sound so significantly that I couldn't actually understand this, what the speaker said for a split second. I thought, what? Oh, that's what they mean. And that's the problem here, especially in a language test. So the word was generic, right? Generic. I think the context we were talking about was a healthcare setting. Someone's talking about generic drugs, a generic drug. Generic, generic, with the emphasis or the word stress on the n sound. Now, this particular speaker, I can't remember their first language, they said generic, generic, generic. So they had even emphasis on each syllable. Generic, 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 generic. So the difference between generic and generic, generic, generic. For me as a native speaker, that's enough of a difference where it will stump me for a second or two and I think, what? Oh, generic. So it's such a subtle skill to apply word stress in the correct spot in order to create the meaning properly. Let's keep going. So in Dravidian languages, stress is usually on the first syllable, always, right? So this is going to pose a big problem. Let me just stop screen sharing for a second because I need to share the sound. I'm just going to play some a little audio file here. Hopefully this works.
Adai, Adai, Vadai, Padai, Pandam, Vazhai, Param.
Okay, so you can hear the stress there. You can hear the stress on the first syllable of the word. Okay, I'm not going to say the words because I'll sound like an idiot, but you could hear that here. Okay, each time consistently, the larger stress on the first syllable of the word and the smaller stress on the following syllable. Okay, now in English, the stress is on different syllables and it depends. So, for example, the word product, pro gets the emphasis and duct gets the smaller emphasis, product. But then we have a word like construct. I'm going to construct a building or construct an argument, construct. And for some reason, the emphasis is here on the second syllable. It gets even weirder though, because that's a verb, right? I'm going to construct something. I'm going to do something, construct, where the emphasis or the stress is on the second syllable. But if I use that word as a noun, like a mental construct, the emphasis shifts to the first syllable. So the word stress is on con, not struct. So I feel very sorry for these students because this is an incredibly, I mean, if they've never been aware of word stress, this is a whole new ball game that they need to be aware of. And it does make a large difference for the comprehension of the language, for me anyway, when I'm listening. Here we have beautiful, beautiful, with beau having the emphasis, tiful, tiful, tiful having much smaller emphasis. Amazing, amazing. So the emphasis here is in the middle of the word. So when I'm teaching OET, for example, it's always good to let the students know about word stress, because when they're interacting with, when these doctors and nurses are interacting with patients whose English is not, you know, maybe it's a native English speaker or somebody else, words that have single emphasis like pill, nurse, blood, first syllable emphasis like doctor, pressure, patient, second syllable emphasis like acute, prescribe, disease, allergy, hospital, ambulance, or middle emphasis like allergic, reaction, discomfort. Anyway, I won't harp on any more than that. So I guess the big question here is for your students is, how do they learn word stress? Or how do you teach word stress? And again, I think it's about consciousness raising, awareness raising initially. They first need to become aware that standard English has a different form of word stress than their first language. Once they've been made aware that there is actually a difference, then they need to pay attention to it. They need to hear it. Then they need to start producing it. There is a technical way where you can actually go to a dictionary. And if you look carefully at the word like construct, this is the verb form that we talked about before, where the emphasis on the str here, not construct. Construct would be different as the noun. But if I'm going to construct something, construct a building, if you look closely here, there's nothing mentioned here in the word. It'll show the part of speech. But if you look closely here at the phonemic alphabet here, you can see a little apostrophe. So there's an apostrophe is placed before the stressed syllable. So construct, construct. So we put the apostrophe before the emphasized syllable here, and it has the UK-US version. If this were the noun form, like a construct, the apostrophe would come right at the beginning because it's that syllable, con, is the one that's emphasized. Oh, you can see it here. Cool. Anyway, that is really a very superficial look at first language interference for Dravidian speakers in terms of pronunciation, looking at consonants, looking at vowels, short, long, and combined or diphthongs. And finally, we looked at word stress. There's more, of course. There's intonation, there's pausing, there's tempo. There's a range of aspects in oral fluency, some of which can be taught very quickly and which the student can go, right, got it, as in slow down for speed. You're speaking too quickly. Others, like word stress, for example, require quite a lot of teaching and practice on the student's end. Cool. Anyway, that concludes my rather quick talk. If you want to find out more, you can feel free to add me on LinkedIn. And you can go to e2language.com if you want to check out the website. Thought we might do a little Q&A. Is that right, Dr. Swamy?
To what extent this word stress can impact the exam test when it comes to PTE or IELTS?
Yes, significantly. I mean, you've got two types of examiners you can think of. One is a human examiner. This, if I'm perfectly honest with you, I think human examiners are so full of biases. They're so biased. They will have all sorts of preconceptions going on, right? So let's say you are giving your IELTS speaking and your examiner actually is a non-native English speaker who speaks your first language. You're going to be in a much better position than if you're speaking to an examiner who is a native English speaker or something else. As I mentioned to you in that story at the start, when I first arrived in Mysore and I would listen to the director of the program speak English from his Kannada first language, I couldn't understand him. 3 months later, I had perfect understanding of Kannada speakers speaking English, right? So if you reverse that and you think about you speaking to a native English speaker who has experience in India with Indian languages versus someone who doesn't, the person who doesn't is going to struggle to understand you, and they'll rate you poorly in pronunciation, and that includes word stress. Then you have a different kind of examiner, and the examiner being an algorithm. Algorithms are not necessarily unbiased because the way that they're created means that they will have biases programmed into them, because the algorithm, for example, might be based on a subset of data of Kannada speakers speaking English, and so the algorithm will be more friendly. So it really depends on how the algorithm is created. But going back to your question, yes, word stress in a speaking exam is hugely important. As I mentioned to you, for me, the difference between generic versus generic can be a split second of me going, what? Or me going, aha, I know immediately what you're saying.
Thank you.
I should mention, I've got, if you're interested in word stress, and if you need some help with it, there is a video on our YouTube channel and our PTE YouTube channel. If you type into YouTube PTE word stress, I'm quite sure that I've done a video up there where you can watch it.
I already did that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Hi Jay, I have got one more question.
Yeah.
So, well, regarding like learning a word stress, so do you think like the dictionary method like that you have discussed with, like 10 minutes ago, like regarding understanding where the apostrophe goes in, so referring to a dictionary can really help me?
Yes, but it's extremely time consuming, and you know, going back to the dictionary each time, I think the best thing that you can do is just, now that you're aware of it, try to hear it when native speakers speak and play around with it yourself in saying different words, especially multi-syllabic words like microphone, microphone, microphone. There's the emphasis on the M sound. And yeah, I think that's all you can do is first become aware of it, listen to it, hear it, and then begin to use it yourself.
Yeah, that's right. But when we hear that one, we will be hearing something. But when we're trying to recreate that one, but that happens like it's difficult, I guess. Like I used to hear for some like news readings from YouTube or like it, but I get to understand something. But when I'm trying to recreate or like shadow that one, but sometimes that doesn't goes on the proper way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a good technique in language learning called shadowing. And what that is, you find a speaker that you like the sound of. Maybe you like their pronunciation, probably a native speaker, if you want to model yourself off that. And let's say you've got a YouTube video or a podcast or something, play it for a few seconds until they say a sentence, and then you say the sentence and try to model the way that they used intonation, word stress, and the sounds. Okay, and you can do it actually simultaneously as they speak. If you have a transcript, it's quite nice to read the transcript as you listen and say it. That's a really nice way to sort of refine your speech.
Anyway, thanks Jay for that one. I really appreciate that one. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, JD, please.
Yes, I want to request you that if you can provide a recorded class, it would be great for us.
Dr. Swamy, will this recording be available?
Yes, it is. It's very much available on the YouTube. By today evening, maybe in 4 or 5 hours, it is available on our YouTube channel. Dr. Swamy Talks.
Okay, thank you so much.
So it's available. It will be available.
I should also mention we have a website on e2school.com. It's sort of e2school.com we built to run parallel with e2language.com. e2language.com is just test prep, right? Methods and practice questions and stuff like that. e2school.com is more fundamental skill building, pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary. So we actually have a pronunciation course. Okay, so this is e2school.com. And if you go to courses here, you'll see we've got this course called Speaking Lab. Speaking Lab is a clever course that takes you through all of the sounds, all of the 44 consonant and vowel sounds of English. So what you might want to do, actually, when you first log in and you go into Speaking Lab, you can choose whether you're a South Indian Dravidian speaker or wherever from, and it will tell you which of the sounds, which of the 44 sounds you should be focusing on, because you obviously don't need to do all 44. Now, how it works is you have a range of listening exercises, which helps you to, first of all, hear or identify the sounds, and then you have a range of speaking activities. And we've built some artificial intelligence into this, and so it will actually give you automatic feedback on your pronunciation. It will tell you if you're pronouncing that consonant or that vowel correctly or not. So you have to sort of work with the AI there and improve your pronunciation. It's also a vocabulary building course. There's a grammar course, and there's some low-level English courses. I'm not sure if they're of use to you or not, but yeah, it's a good website. We will eventually get into you know, word stress and consonant clusters and all the other stuff, but that's what we've got so far. The opportunity, Dr. Swamy, I appreciate it.